Under a bruised sky where the first snow fell like sifted ash, the land lay still and listening. The high mesas wore their winter hush, and the cottonwoods along the frozen creek trembled with a sound like the breath of ghosts. Somewhere in that silence, deep within a lonely hollow of New Mexico's northern rim, smoke rose from a half-broken chimney, thin, fragile, but stubborn as a prayer. Inside the small cabin, a man sat before the fire, bare to the waist, mending a bridle strap. Taza Greywolf's back gleamed in the firelight, scars cutting across it like pale rivers. He was a man carved from the earth itself, sinew wrapped in quiet. His hair, long and black as wet obsidian, brushed his shoulders. The only sound in the room was the low pop of sap from the burning pine, and the whisper of the wind crawling through the cracks of the door. Outside, the world darkened, and the snow began to fall harder. Thick, slow flakes like feathers from a dying bird. The first storm of the season had come early. The air smelled of iron and smoke. Taza lifted his head slightly, the way a wolf does when it senses a tremor that has nothing to do with weather. Something, a faint cry, or maybe the echo of one, drifted between the gusts. He stilled. Another sound followed, thin and trembling, like a small fist knocking against a hollow tree. Then came a voice, so faint that it seemed made of mist. "Please help." Taza was on his feet in an instant. The bridle strap fell, forgotten. He crossed the dirt floor and pulled open the heavy door. The wind slapped him with cold so sharp it stung the eyes. Through the whirling white, a tiny figure stood. A girl, no taller than his ribs, barefoot, her skin the color of copper dust and her hair tangled with frost. Her deerskin wrap hung in tatters, one shoulder bare, smeared with dried blood. She looked up at him with eyes that no child should have, ancient, wild and full of pain. He stepped forward as she swayed. "Who?" She collapsed into his arms before he could finish. The snow caught in her lashes as he carried her inside, closing the door with his heel. She weighed almost nothing, a small bundle of bones and cold breath. He set her on the bed near the fire, the hide blankets crackling with warmth. From the back corner of the room, a voice rasped like wind over dry leaves. "You bring in death, my son?" It was Nazca, his mother's sister, blind now, her silver hair braided into a crown. She sat wrapped in woven blankets, hands resting on her knees, eyes white with the fog of age. Taza didn't answer at first. He poured a little warm water into a bowl and touched the girl's neck. Her pulse fluttered weakly. "She's alive," he murmured. Nazca tilted her head. "For now." He began washing the blood from the girl's shoulder. Beneath the grime, her skin was bruised, deep purple blotches like crushed berries. There were welts on her arms, the kind made by a belt or rope. His jaw hardened, but his hands stayed gentle. When the child stirred, her lips moved soundlessly. He leaned close. They beat me," she whispered. "Mama tried to stop them. They said, 'We don't belong here.'" Her voice broke on the word belong. Taza's throat tightened. "Who did this?" "White men, 3 of them. They took Mama. They laughed when I ran." She turned her face into the blanket, shaking. Nazca's blind eyes flicked toward the sound of her voice. Another orphan of their greed. The fire cracked louder. Outside, the wind began to howl against the roof. Taza placed a damp cloth across the girl's forehead. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Ayana." Her eyes opened just enough for him to see the faint shimmer of tears. "Mama said my name means eternal blossom. But I think I'm dying." The words cut through him like a knife left in old flesh. He swallowed. "Not tonight." He fed the fire, then took down a pot of herbs from Nazca's shelf. Sage, bear root, and the bitter leaf she used for fever. Nazca listened, smiling faintly. "So the soldier remembers the healer's ways." "I remember," he said, and for a moment, the name soldier tasted like ash in his mouth. He had once fought beside white soldiers, guided them through Apache lands for promises that turned to betrayal. When the raids came, his family was burned alive. Since then, he'd spoken little, trusted less. Ayana stirred again. Are you a spirit?" He looked down at her small hand, fingers like twigs curling around his wrist. "No. Just a man." She seemed to accept that, though her breathing remained shallow. As night deepened, the storm built into a roar. Snow piled against the window ledge. The cabin groaned under the weight. Taza sat beside the bed, half-naked still, watching the flames paint the girl's face in gold and shadow. He thought of the men she spoke of. White riders who hunted Apaches for sport, claiming land piece by piece. He knew the type, men who measured worth by blood spilled. The law seldom punished them. The deputy in town might grumble, but he would not cross his own kind. Still, something inside Taza, long buried under the soil of his silence, began to stir. It was not rage at first. It was grief. The kind that makes a man tremble, because it remembers what he once tried to forget. Nazca broke the silence with a low hum, an old morning song that rose and fell like a heartbeat. "The child is a sign," she said. "The ancestors bring what we must face." Taza's gaze drifted toward the shuttered window, where wind hissed through the cracks. "I have faced enough." "Then why did you open the door?" she asked. He had no answer. The storm raged until midnight. Ayana's breathing steadied, but her fever grew. She murmured in her sleep, calling for her mother. He stayed by her side, sometimes dabbing her forehead, sometimes only listening to the rhythm of her fragile life. At last, exhaustion pulled at his limbs. He sat back against the wall, eyes half closed, drifting between waking and dreams. In those dreams he saw fire again, the blaze that swallowed his village years ago. The faces of children like this one, their cries lost beneath the thunder of rifles. He woke with a jolt, sweat cooling on his chest. Ayana's hand rested on his. "I saw her," she whispered weakly. "Mama. She was in the dark. I think she's still there." He bent close. "Where?" "The trading post, by the river bend. The one with the red sign." He knew the place. Jonas Reeves' post, where liquor, flesh, and furs changed hands under the pretense of trade. Men there had no law except cruelty. "Rest," he said. "You're safe now." She tried to smile, but tears spilled instead. "Will you get her?" Taza looked into the fire, the way his aunt often did, as if it might answer for him. Flames whispered in their own language, crackling like soft bones. Finally, he nodded once. "Yes." Nazca's voice came from behind, quiet but sharp. "You will bring more death if you go." "Maybe," he said, "but the storm has already brought one." The old woman said no more. The rest of the night passed in a silence heavy as snow. The wind eased before dawn. When the first light slid through the cracks of the shutter, Taza rose. Frost had gathered on his beard. He wrapped himself in a thick hide and stepped outside. The world had changed. Hills once brown and broken were now white, endless, pure. The creek was a frozen mirror, and the pine trees bent under the weight of heaven's dust. For a moment it looked like peace, but peace built on silence can feel like a grave. He scanned the horizon. Smoke trails in the distance marked the trading post's direction. Too far for a child to have come alone in the night. She must have wandered for hours, guided only by pain and some unseen mercy. Behind him, Nazca's voice floated through the doorway. "If you go, go as one who heals, not as one who kills." He didn't answer. He only looked back once at the doorway where Ayana slept. Her small face was turned toward the light, lips parted in faint breath. A tiny hand clutched a ragged scrap of cloth, perhaps from her mother's dress. He saddled his Mustang in the pale morning. The horse snorted steam, hooves crunching the frost. Before mounting, he took one last look at the cabin. Smoke trailed steady from the chimney again, like a promise to return. As he placed his foot in the stirrup, something made him pause. A sound, distant but distinct, echoed down the valley. The ringing of iron on iron, the faint jingle of harness and spur. He turned sharply. On the far ridge, dark figures moved against the snow. 3 riders, their coats snapping in the wind. Even from that distance, he could see the way they rode. Loose, arrogant, the gait of men who believe nothing can stop them. He stood still, watching them descend toward the creek. When he went back inside, the air felt heavier. Nazca sensed his tension. "What did you see?" "Ghosts," he said. "Not ghosts. she murmured. Men without souls look the same from far away. Ayana stirred again. They're coming. He touched her shoulder gently. Sleep. But he knew she was right. The world outside that door had already begun to move against them. He poured water into the basin, his hands steady though his heart beat hard. The scent of burning pine mixed with the bitter tang of cold. He thought of all he'd left buried, his weapons, his rage, his name whispered in the army's books as traitor and scout. The years of silence, of pretending to be only a man who chopped wood and healed animals. All of it now cracked like ice beneath his feet. The door rattled once as the wind pushed against it, then fell still. Nazca began another song, this one lower, older, a prayer for strength. The melody seeped through the cracks, mingling with the rising sound of hooves far away. Taza stood by the window, bare chest gleaming with sweat despite the cold. The fire's glow flickered across his eyes, and for the first time in many winters, they burned not with grief but with purpose. Ayana's whisper floated from the bed, small and fierce. You'll save her, won't you? He didn't speak. Words were too fragile for what stirred inside him. Instead, he drew the curtain closed, stepped into the dim light, and began tying the old leather strap of his knife around his thigh. Outside, the snow fell thicker again, heavy and unrelenting, as though the heavens themselves wished to hide what was coming. When he opened the door, a blast of white wind poured in. The girl's small cry followed him, a sound between fear and hope. He looked back only once, the shadow of a giant framed in the doorway, hair whipping, eyes dark as storm clouds. Then he stepped into the snow. And far beyond the ridge, the three riders kept coming, their laughter carried faintly through the wind, unaware that death, quiet and barefoot, had already risen to meet them. Snow pressed against the cabin walls as though trying to listen. The storm had softened into silence, but its breath still clung to the eaves, and every gust sent a whisper through the cracks. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. Ayana slept beneath hides near the hearth, her cheeks flushed with fever. Nazca sat cross-legged, grinding roots in a clay bowl, her blind eyes white and distant as winter moons. Taza crouched beside the girl, his palm brushing the damp curls from her forehead. The rhythm of her breathing anchored him, fragile, uncertain, yet alive. He could still feel the weight of her small hand from the night before, the tremor in her voice when she spoke of her mother. It had been years since anyone had asked him to save anything. Nazca's voice drifted through the dim light. The child carries fire in her blood. Too much pain for one so small. He glanced at her. Pain burns out or it turns to steel. Or mercy, she said softly, crushing the herbs harder. Though that is the rarest metal of all. He didn't reply. The word mercy felt strange in his chest, a language he'd forgotten. Outside, the first light of morning had turned the snow into silver dust. When he stepped out, breath steaming, the land looked reborn, pure, untouched, almost holy. Yet beneath that stillness, he knew cruelty lingered. Somewhere down the valley, Jonas Reeve and his men slept warm in their post, wrapped in the spoils of misery. By the time Taza returned inside, the girl was awake. Her small eyes followed him, half fear, half trust. Drink this, Nazca said, lifting a cup of steaming herbs. For the fever. Ayana grimaced at the bitterness, but Taza steadied the cup for her. You're strong, he murmured. Like your name. She blinked up at him. Will Mama be strong too? He hesitated, then nodded. If she breathes, she will fight. If she fights, I'll find her. Nazca's thin fingers tightened on the bowl. Do not promise what the snow may bury. Taza met her gaze, quiet but firm. Then I will dig. He rose, crossing to the chest near the bed. From beneath the old blankets, he drew out a wrapped bundle, his past folded in leather. When he unrolled it, the metal glint of a long knife caught the firelight. Beside it lay his father's eagle feather, darkened by smoke from long ago. Ayana's eyes widened. You're going to fight them? He paused. I'm going to see them. Her little hand reached out, grasping his wrist. Don't let them hurt you too. That small plea struck something deep. No one had spoken to him with worry in years. He rested his other hand gently over hers. The storm hides me. The storm is with me. Nazca's voice trembled behind them. Storms destroy what they touch. He looked at her, the firelight painting the hollows of her face. So does silence. For a long moment, none of them moved. The only sound was the pop of pine, and the faint whistle of wind through the boards. When he finally stepped outside again, the sun was veiled behind clouds, turning the snow to pearl. His Mustang pawed impatiently at the frozen ground, mane glittering with frost. He saddled it in silence, his breath mingling with the horse's. He had no plan beyond the pulse of purpose in his chest. Find the woman, bring her back, and if death followed, so be it. Behind him, Nazca appeared in the doorway, leaning on her cane. You walk the road of blood again, she said. Maybe this time it leads to peace. Peace is not won by knives. He turned his head slightly, voice low. No. But sometimes it must be carved. Her expression softened. If mercy finds you, let it stay. He mounted, and as he rode off, Ayana's faint voice carried through the air, weak but sure. Bring her home, Big Papa Sky. The words followed him down the frozen trail like a blessing he didn't deserve. The ride to the river bend took most of the day. Clouds thickened again, heavy with more snow. He crossed the valley where the wind never stopped moving, and every shape, tree, rock, fence post, seemed ghost-like under its white cloak. The ache in his chest grew sharper with each mile, a mixture of memory and foreboding. He had once believed he'd left vengeance behind, buried under years of solitude. But vengeance, he realized, is like fire and ash. It waits for a breath to rise again. As the trading post came into view, smoke curling from its crooked chimney, he slowed his horse. A crude sign swung above the door. Reeves Supplies and Trade. The word trade always made him sick. Too often it meant taking what could not be given back. He dismounted quietly, moving to the barn first. Voices murmured inside. Men laughing, the sound of a whip striking something soft. He slipped through the side door, silent as a shadow. The stench of liquor and sweat thickened the air. Lantern light flickered over the shapes of three men. One leaned against a stall, chewing tobacco. Another polished a rifle. The third, Reeve himself, stood near a pile of straw where a woman lay chained by the wrist. Sahale. Even beneath bruises and blood, she was beautiful. Her hair hung matted over her face, and her shoulders shivered with each breath. Taza's body went still, the fire inside him tightening into a single point. He could hear Reeve speaking, voice lazy, cruel. Should have left your brat to freeze. Maybe she's coyote meat by now. The other men laughed. Taza moved. The first man didn't even finish his grin before the knife slid across his throat. A clean, swift motion. The second turned. Too late. Taza struck him down with the butt of the blade, the sound of bones snapping lost in the howl of wind outside. Reeve staggered back, reaching for his pistol. Who? Taza stepped into the light. The fire from the lantern painted his chest gold, his eyes black. A ghost, he said softly. Reeve fired, the shot grazing Taza's arm. The Apache didn't flinch. He drove the knife into Reeve's side, twisting just once, then letting the man fall among the straw. For a long moment, only the wind spoke. Sahale stared, trembling. Who are you? Taza knelt, breaking the chain with one sharp pull. Ayana sent me. Her eyes widened. My child. She's alive. Sahale's sob came out like a prayer. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Taza caught her easily, wrapping her in his fur cloak. Can you ride? She shook her head weakly. I can try. Outside, snow began to fall again, heavier than before. He lifted her onto the horse, climbed behind, and turned toward the mountains. The storm swallowed their tracks almost instantly, the world vanishing into white. As they rode, Sahale pressed her face to his chest, whispering through tears. You'll bring her back to me? Yes, he said, though his arm burned where the bullet had grazed him. No storm can stop me now. In the distance, thunder rolled. A warning, low and distant, promising the wrath yet to come. And behind them, at the trading post, the flames from the fallen lantern caught the straw where Reeve lay. Slowly, greed's kingdom began to burn, its fire licking upward into the night sky like the first cry of justice. The snow had turned to needles by the time they reached the canyon pass. Wind tore through the pines, dragging the world into a blur of white and shadow. The Mustang stumbled once, its breath steaming hard, but Taz's hand on its neck steadied it. Sahel clung to him, weak yet stubbornly upright, her face pressed to his chest. The storm was devouring everything, the path, the horizon, even the sound of their hearts. He rode by instinct, eyes narrowed against the sting. The river trail had vanished beneath drifts, forcing him to cut across open ground, where the land curved like the spine of a sleeping beast. He could feel the weight of the fire behind them, the burning trading post now a smear of orange in the distance. That flame would draw men, lawmen and killers alike, and soon the valley would fill with their anger. Sahel lifted her head faintly. "They'll come. I know." Her fingers trembled against his arm. "You should leave me." He tightened his hold. "No. You don't owe me." He looked down at her, snow catching in her lashes. "The child does." Her eyes closed again, tears freezing before they could fall. She murmured something he couldn't hear over the wind, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. They rode until the canyon narrowed into a throat of rock, where the wind howled louder but the snow eased. He found shelter beneath an overhang, old stone hollowed by centuries of storms. There he dismounted, lifting Sahel gently down. Her knees buckled, and he caught her before she fell. Inside the hollow, he struck a spark from flint, coaxing flame from the dry moss he'd carried in his pouch. The small fire bloomed weakly, casting gold over their faces. The storm's voice softened to a muffled roar outside. Sahel leaned back against the wall, breathing shallowly. Her wrists were raw from the chains, her dress torn to ribbons. Yet there was strength in her eyes, something fierce surviving beneath exhaustion. "You killed them," she said quietly. Taza looked into the flames. "Yes." "Do you regret it?" He shook his head. "No. But I will pay for it." She studied him for a long time. "You sound like a man who has already died." "Maybe I did once," he said. "The world just forgot to bury me." A faint smile touched her lips. "My daughter will like you." He met her gaze then, the fire painting her face in amber. "She already does." The silence that followed was heavy but not cruel. It was the silence of two broken souls breathing in rhythm, stitched together by necessity, and something deeper neither dared name. He tended her wounds with melted snow and herbs from his pouch. When she winced, he murmured an old Apache prayer under his breath, the same one his mother had whispered over him when he was a boy. She listened, eyes half closed, as though the words themselves were medicine. Outside, the wind shifted. A new sound rose within it, distant, rhythmic, unnatural. Hooves. Many of them. Taza's head snapped up. Sahel straightened, her hand tightening on his arm. "They found us." He doused the fire with a sweep of his palm, plunging them into near darkness. Only the faint light of snow filtered through the cave mouth. He moved to the entrance, crouching low, peering out into the white. 5 riders. Lanterns swinging. The first carried a badge that gleamed like ice. Deputy Clay Morton. Taza's jaw tightened. He'd known Morton once, long ago, when he still believed in the possibility of peace. The man had spared him once, turned away when others called for his hanging. But mercy has a short memory in a land ruled by fear. The riders dismounted near the creek. Morton's voice carried faintly over the wind. "Tracks end here. Spread out." Taza turned back to Sahel. "Stay low. Don't make a sound." Her eyes flicked to the knife at his hip. "You'll kill them too?" "Only if they force me." She grabbed his hand suddenly, surprising him. "Don't become what they made you." For a moment, the storm seemed to hold its breath. He looked at her, this wounded woman, shivering but defiant, and something softened inside him, like snow melting on a stone that still remembers heat. Then he moved. He stepped out into the blizzard, the knife sheathed, hands open. The wind hit him full in the chest, whipping his hair across his face. The riders spotted him instantly, 5 shapes turning as one, rifles raised. Morton rode forward, lowering his weapon slightly. Grey Wolf. You always did walk out of hell like you owned it. Taza's voice was calm, steady. The storm covers all tracks, deputy. You should turn back. Morton's horse stamped nervously. Posts burned to the ground. Reeve and his men, dead. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that. They burned themselves, Taza said. Some fires need no help. Morton's gaze flicked toward the cave. You've got someone with you. A woman. She's hurt. Then hand her over. She's a witness. Taza took a slow step forward. She's a victim. Morton's jaw clenched. So are we all. He raised his rifle a little higher. Don't make me choose between the law and a debt I should have left unpaid. The wind screamed again, throwing snow between them like a veil. For an instant, the world blurred. Two men facing one another across the breadth of history. One born to justice, the other to survival. Both chained by ghosts. Taza lowered his gaze. If you ever believed mercy mattered, believe it now. The woman and her child have suffered enough. Morton hesitated. Behind him, one of the younger riders spat into the snow. Ain't no mercy for red thieves. The words snapped something in the air. Morton turned sharply, but before he could speak, the man raised his gun. The crack echoed off the canyon walls. Taza moved faster than thought. The bullet tore a line across his shoulder as he lunged, wrenching the weapon away, striking the man down with the back of his hand. The others shouted, chaos breaking loose. Morton held up a hand. Hold your fire. But it was too late. The moment for reason had passed. Taza grabbed the fallen rifle and fired once into the air, not to kill but to warn. The sound thundered through the canyon, scattering the horses. The men shouted, blinded by snow and confusion. In the chaos, Taza turned and ran for the cave. Sahel stood at the entrance, her face pale but determined. She reached for him as he stumbled inside, blood trailing down his arm. You're bleeding, she gasped. He gritted his teeth. Better me than you. Outside, Morton's voice bellowed again. Taza! Don't make me chase you. Taza leaned against the wall, breathing hard. The storm was worsening. The wind shrieked through the canyon like a living thing. Sahel pressed a cloth against his wound, her hands shaking. What will you do? He looked toward the mouth of the cave, where snow whirled like ghosts around the lanterns. The storm called my name once before. Maybe it's time I answer. She caught his wrist. You can't fight a world this big alone. His eyes met hers, dark and steady. Then I'll fight until it listens. A gust of wind tore through the canyon, extinguishing every light outside but one. The men's shouts faded into the distance, swallowed by the white. And in that silence, broken only by the storm's breath, Taza whispered to the wind. If they come again, let them find me ready. The next flash of lightning revealed his shadow against the cave wall. Tall, unyielding, half man, half myth, while the snow outside kept falling, erasing all tracks but his. Night fell like a shroud of coal over the canyon, broken only by the restless glow of firelight flickering against the stone. The storm had passed, but its echo still trembled through the earth, a low growl that lived in the bones of the valley. Inside the hollow, Taza sat near the embers, blood dried on his shoulder, breath fogging faintly. Beside him, Sahel fed the fire with splinters of wood, her movements slow but steady. Her eyes, though shadowed by exhaustion, burned with quiet resolve. Neither spoke for a long while. The silence between them was alive with unspoken things. Fear, gratitude, a strange tenderness that neither dared name. Every now and then, she would glance toward the cave mouth, where snow still fell in thin veils. Somewhere beyond that white curtain, lawmen gathered, waiting for daylight to bring justice or death. Taza's gaze lingered on the flame. The smoke curled upward in ghostly ribbons, whispering shapes he almost recognized. His mother's face, the warriors he'd buried, the little girl's eyes when she'd whispered save her. The world seemed built of memory tonight, and each ember carried a piece of it. Sahel broke the quiet. You can still run. He didn't look at her. A man can outrun men. Not his own shadow. She swallowed hard. They'll kill you. They'll hang you in the square, same as they did the others. He smiled faintly, a flicker of something both sad and proud. Then I'll swing knowing she lives. A shiver passed through her. She reached into her cloak and drew out a small bundle of cloth, Ayana's ragged scrap of dress. She'd kept it pressed close to her heart the entire journey. She's all I have, she whispered. If you die, what becomes of her? His answer was simple. She learns to live. Stronger than us. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks into the air. For an instant, they looked like stars falling too close to Earth. From outside, a voice carried through the wind. Taza Greywolf. Sahale stiffened. It was Morton. His tone was not anger now. It was weary, almost pleading. Don't make this worse, he called. You've done enough. Let the woman go. Taza rose slowly, pulling his knife from his belt. She's free, he murmured. And I'll see she stays that way. Sahale caught his arm. Please. Not again. No more blood. He turned to her, and for the first time, his face softened fully. The blood is already spilled. I'm only keeping it from freezing. He stepped into the mouth of the cave, wind slicing against his skin. The moon hung low over the canyon, pale and watchful. Down below, 5 men stood near the creek, rifles ready but hands uncertain. Their horses stamped nervously in the snow. Morton dismounted, stepping forward alone. You're cornered, Greywolf. Don't make me fire. Taza's voice came low, steady as stone. You already did. Morton's eyes flicked to the bandage on Taza's arm. That wasn't my bullet. No, Taza said. But it was your silence. The deputy flinched. For a moment, the storm inside him showed in the twitch of his jaw. I didn't come to kill you. I came to end this. Taza's fingers tightened on the knife hilt. Then put down your gun. Morton hesitated, then slowly lowered his rifle into the snow. The others murmured in confusion behind him. Sahale appeared in the entrance, cloak wrapped tight, hair whipping in the wind. The moonlight struck her face like a blade of silver. She looked from Morton to Taza. 2 men divided by a wound older than either of them could heal. She's the reason I fought, Taza said, nodding toward her. The reason I live. Morton took a step closer, snow crunching beneath his boots. And she'll die with you if you keep fighting. Before either could move, a shot cracked the night. One of Morton's men had fired, panic or pride driving his hand. The bullet missed its mark, striking the rock above Taza's head, sending shards flying. The canyon exploded with sound. Taza dove aside, knife flashing, and Morton spun, shouting for the men to hold fire. But fear has no master once it wakes. Gunfire erupted, echoing between the cliffs. Sparks from muzzle flashes lit the snow like fireflies. Taza moved with brutal grace, rolling behind a fallen log, returning one shot with a rifle seized from the ground. A man fell. Another fled. The night became a chaos of smoke, light, and breathless curses. Sahale crouched inside the cave, covering her ears, praying to any god who might still listen. When the smoke began to thin, only 2 figures still stood. Morton and Taza, a dozen paces apart, weapons empty, snow red at their feet. The deputy's breath came ragged. You could have been more than this, Greywolf. Taza's voice was calm, almost kind. I was never less. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Morton dropped his gun. Go, he said hoarsely. Take her. Take the child. I'll tell them you died here. Taza blinked, unsure he'd heard right. Why? Because, Morton said, his voice breaking. Once you spared me, and I've carried that mercy like a stone ever since. The words settled between them, heavy and clean. Taza lowered his knife. The night fell quiet again, save for the hiss of snow melting on blood-warm stone. He turned toward the cave. Sahale waited there, trembling. When their eyes met, she saw something in him that wasn't just survival. It was surrender of another kind, the kind that comes after a man has made peace with what he's done. He walked to her slowly, each step deliberate, as though returning to the earth itself. She reached for his hand. Is it over? She asked. He shook his head. Not yet. But we're alive. Morton's men gathered the wounded. None dared meet Taza's gaze as he passed. The deputy stood watching as the pair mounted the Mustang, the moon turning them into silhouettes of myth, man and woman, shadow and light. As they rode up the ridge, Sahel pressed close, her voice barely a whisper. "When we find her, our girl, what then?" He looked ahead, where dawn trembled faintly on the edge of the world. "Then we start again." Behind them, the fire from the gunpowder and spilled oil spread across the snow, a burning scar that glowed against the night. It lit the canyon walls like the inside of a forge, painting their faces in gold and crimson. The storm had left its mark, broken trees, blood in the drifts and silence heavy as prayer. But something new lingered too. Mercy, fragile as a heartbeat, still alive beneath the ash. When they reached the ridge's peak, Ayana's faint voice drifted on the wind. A child's laugh carried from afar, pure and bright as the sun breaking through clouds. Sahel gasped, tears blurring her sight. "Do you hear her?" Taza closed his eyes. The sound pierced through the noise of his soul, washing everything clean. He exhaled slowly, letting the wind carry his answer. "I do." The Mustang halted on the ridge's edge. Below, the valley shimmered under the first blush of morning. Smoke rose in the distance where the trading post had burned to dust, and in its place, the snow shone unbroken, white as forgiveness. He turned once toward the canyon, where Morton stood small beneath the fading moon. Then, with a quiet nod of thanks, Taza spurred the horse forward. The sun touched the mountains, setting the snow aflame, and for a heartbeat, the world looked whole again. Somewhere behind them, an ember cracked, its light fading into dawn. And though no one could see it in that final shimmer of firelight, the shape of three souls, one man, one woman, one child, seemed to walk together through the storm's long shadow, toward the promise of home.